So the climate finance strategy launched today is a pivotal milestone, a bridge between Sri Lanka's national climate ambitions and the financial ecosystem that must support them. It represents a shift from a fragmented, project-based interventions to a strategic framework that integrates fiscal policy, financial systems, and private investment to deliver climate action to scale. It defines how we mobilize, channel, and track climate investments, linking government action, private capital, and development finance into one coherent framework. This discussion aims to explore how the climate finance strategy can move from strategy to execution. What practical steps can each actor take? The Treasury, the regulators, the banks, the private sector, and our development partners to unlock financing for a low-carbon, climate-resilience economy. I would like to welcome our expert panelists today, Ms. Vishaka Amarasekara, Additional Director General, External Resources Department, Ministry of Finance, Mr. Neil Randini, Director, Climate Change Secretariat, Ministry of Environment, Ms. Manohari Gunawardana, Senior Financial Sector Specialist of the Asian Development Bank, Ms. Vindhya Jayasekara, CEO of the Colombo Stock Exchange, and Mr. Adisha Pereira, Climate Finance Subcommittee Lead, Climate Action Steering Committee, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. So the climate finance strategy offers a very timely opportunity for Sri Lanka to position fiscal policy as a driver of green growth. So from your perspective, what are the opportunities that CFS creates for the Ministry of Finance to strengthen public investment planning, fiscal resilience, and climate-aligned budgeting?
If you look at this strategy, if you look at the 12 instruments in this strategy, they all have a part to play in the fiscal role. For example, what does the fiscal really, I mean, if you really look at it in a simplistic manner, the fiscal has to be about the revenue. It's about the expenditure. It's about the financing. Just to take three main lines that anybody at the Ministry of Finance would be thinking of. And in that context, you can see, in the context of revenue, the climate financing strategy, take the case of park fees, right? What does it mean? It means that we are making the parks more self-sustaining. We are allowing the parks to develop their own mechanisms to be climate aligned, to be environmentally positive to that extent. One can argue that it would also mean that the burden, the fiscal burden the burden onto the fiscal is somewhat mitigated. So that's one instrument. But whilst also supporting that same activity to take place. So that's one. Take the context of expenditure. So that works in the context of improving revenue and also maybe foregoing expenditure. But then take something like an ESG swap. Right? What does it mean? A debt for climate swap. What it means at the end of the day, it is a tool that the government of Sri Lanka can use in its debt management, which is a very key part of its fiscal strategy. So it means you can reduce your quantum of debt and yet channel your resources to other conservation-based, sustainability-linked activities, which is, in a way, the government is already committed to certain, I think, internationally and domestically to these activities. So to that extent, you can see now these are instruments that link clearly with the budget outcome. I think to all of us who are at the Treasury, we understand what the budget outcome is about. And so it links. So I think most of these instruments can be placed in various points of the budget outcome, and they are definitely not dealing from the fiscal space. It supports the fiscal space, and it also in a way expands the fiscal's ability to operate in a more, I would say, sustainable manner.
Thank you, Nisar. I have a follow-up question about the various instruments that bring in revenue as well as direct expenditure towards productive use on climate action. Many of these instruments to be implemented, they require a lot of data and data sharing among institutions. And so I would like to understand from the government's perspective, how do you see the improvements of the data infrastructure, such as could be a national spatial data infrastructure in place? I believe there are some upcoming disaster risk analytics, and there are some new university-based labs, data labs. Now, how can we leverage these to enhance investment readiness?
All right, let me take the disaster risk insurance, which is a very key part of the strategy. One reason why disaster risk insurances either fail or never take off is because of the lack of data, right? And when you say data, it has to be credible data, and it has to have some amount of precision, and that would support the premiums to be somewhat affordable. I mean, because it's about the risk, right? So I think one thing we need to do to action this out, like something like a disaster risk insurance instrument, is to ensure that we do, wherever it may be, could be from the National Spatial Data facility, but we create a repository of data that is credible, where the private sector is in a position to access, where anybody is in a position to access, and then move forward. I don't think it's the job of the government, and I think the government from its highest echelons have said so, to interfere into some of these commercial spaces. But I think it's the job of the government to actually create the environment, create the necessary infrastructure. And I view this data to be the infrastructure that can be provided so that the private sector can take it from there. So that's how I view this.
Mr. Leela Randeni from the Ministry of Environment. Mr. Randeni, considering the upcoming COP30 and enhanced NDC 3.0 commitments, how might a strategy like the climate finance strategy sort of open new opportunities to implement the NDC 3.0? And what would be the role of the Ministry of Environment in advancing NDC 3.0 and climate finance opportunities, together with Ministry of Finance?
Climate finance is one of the most important means of implementation what we are getting from the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. So far, we are accessing to the finance from the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, likewise, and other different donors are also, there are different mechanisms. But I didn't see a good collaboration in between the different ministries even. Ultimately, we are really contributing and we are working for the public investment program, so that we should have ideal tools and platforms to integrate this development into the public investment program.
And for the private sector to take a more proactive role, policy consistency is quite important. In that sense, and I think I won't congratulate the Ministry of Finance and the community for having this goal of society how the government kind of Ministry of Environment. So we've seen from around 2018, 2019, central bank has been kind of engaging the financial system to mobilize more, orient more capital to the real sector. And so that supply side, there has been some work happening, but I think when we had engagement with central bank also, and what they said is on the real sector, it must come through the fiscal aspects. And now we have the national kind of finance strategy, which is a whole of government, fiscal, what the plan would be in the next few years. So it kind of gives you then, as the private sector, where are the, what are these kind of, as a government, what are these key priorities that the government is looking at, what are the instruments, and also it helps us to deep dive into see how we can get involved. So I think in that respect, it also comes at an opportune time, because as you know, the CXCs and crowd stock exchanges here, many of the private sector is also now made to think of it longer term, right? So with the IFRS, this financial reporting standard, looking at getting companies to look at not just the short term, but also the mid to long term on how their value chains, their business ecosystems can get affected by climate change and understand the financial impact of it. So I think when the private sector, when not only the larger corporates, but everyone across starts to understand the risks and also potential returns in moving some of these risky opportunities, then it will naturally move. But for us to do that, I think one of the important things is data, and I think that's where for us to understand what the risk is, or how it can affect us at present, given the future scenarios. So I think what Vishaka alluded to, it's quite important that public investment is routed to enabling national spatial data infrastructure and having it in a way which is democratized, so that everyone has a certain access to a certain amount of data, where if they want to, if they can't handle it on their own, they can come to a certain party, right, and help them do that. But it's important to be kind of publicly accessible. And so if I'm investing in a particular factory or location, I understand what the physical and cultural risks are. So that's one thing. And also, before I end, I also want to say that as a private sector, with this IFRS and other reporting things, what happens to happen is companies can also become insular. They can look at only their value chain, but I think there is a need to connect from a kind of very narrow mindset to looking at it from a more national perspective. In that sense, I think the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce has been engaging with the Ministry of Environment as well on the NDC 3.0 and the NAP process. So there is potential for us to, as a chamber, work with the as chamber and also the banking sector to work with the private sector entities to make sure that the things that we are doing are aligned with the national strategy. So that's a role that we can play, and I think we can talk about more about it.